Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to challenge a massive, fundamental assumption about IT career growth and human behavior. It's honestly something that completely redefines how we look at, moving up the corporate ladder.
And as you'll see, it turns out our standard HR playbooks,
Yeah, they might actually be driving our absolute best architectural minds away.
so here's what we're looking at today. We'll start by debunking the universal pathway myth, decode the yellow psychological filter, look at the collision of different interpretations, explore the silent synthesis drift, and finally, we'll see how AI enables adaptive architecture. Let's get into it. Section 1, the universal pathway myth, rethinking IT careers.
Let's kick things off with a totally broken assumption that almost every company blindly accepts, right? Standard HR frameworks tell us that to really grow in IT, you eventually have to move into management or marketing. It's treated like this universal finish line. It's almost as if the ultimate reward for being a brilliant technical architect is, well, never touching architecture again.
But when we actually look at the behavioral data, we see something super strange. The people with the absolute highest capacity for complex, adaptive problem solving actually run the other way. They actively avoid this supposedly universal path. So what's really going on here? Why in the world are the sharpest architects rejecting the traditional ladder?
All right, Section 2, decoding the yellow filter, the systemic lens. Take a close look at this number, negative 0.1935. Now, this is a Pearson correlation drawn from a massive dataset spanning 45 countries and 10 languages, with a sample size of 193. That is well above the critical reliability threshold of 0.142, so this is really solid data. What it tells us is that individuals operating in the yellow stage of spiral dynamics, which, if you're familiar, is a psychological framework for how humans adapt to complexity, these folks actively deprioritize marketing as an essential IT job factor. And the underlying data here brilliantly illustrates exactly why. As we can see, the yellow mindset optimizes for systemic synthesis and strategic autonomy. They show a really strong positive correlation with emergent fields like data science at plus 0.2269, and they strongly value flexible schedules. Meanwhile, they strongly reject junior-level positioning. So they aren't rejecting growth, right? They're rejecting functional specialization in favor of deep, complex problem solving.
Now, you might be wondering, where exactly does this super precise data come from? Well, it's extracted from a dynamic programming model using 5 deep psychological layers of sensing. So instead of just looking at the surface, the visible behavior and actions in that red layer, this model dives all the way down to hidden motivations, values, and internal psychology. By processing over 13,000 global correlations, it proves that behavior isn't just a random action you observe. It's actually a measurable equation. Moving on to Section 3, Interpretation Collision. 1 role, 3 views.
This brings us to what we call the prediction gap. You can literally have the exact same job specialty, like marketing, but it means entirely different things depending on your psychological profile. An orange thinker, driven by achievement, sees marketing as this amazing strategic lever for competitive positioning and scaling. A green thinker? They see it as a relational bridge for community engagement. But a yellow thinker looks at marketing and sees it as potentially decoupled from deep, systemic technical integration.
Like this quote points out, yellow isn't rejecting communication itself. They aren't just anti-marketing. They're rejecting the loss of their integrative anchor. When our career frameworks ignore that systemic context and try to push marketing as some universal baseline for growth, they are actively, if unintentionally, alienating their absolute best structural thinkers. Which brings us to Section 4, Silent Synthesis Drift, the Butterfly Effect. When IT frameworks treat marketing as the only way up, it triggers a predictable yet pretty destructive butterfly effect. First, you have that growth universal framing. This immediately causes your systemic thinkers to grow deeply skeptical. Sure, they might take the promotion, but they engage in performative specialization, basically just playing the part without any deep engagement. And ultimately, the company suffers a silent synthesis drift, quietly losing its deep architectural coherence.
Instead of recognizing yellow's preference as a crucial adaptive capacity protocol, companies literally pathologize it. They look at these brilliant integrators and just dismiss them as having a narrow technical focus. And what happens? Talent development completely misaligns with what the company actually needs. Career metrics falsely prize functional silos over true cross-domain synthesis. And eventually, trust just completely erodes between management and top-tier talent. If you're only managing your teams from a spreadsheet, looking purely at the functional layout of roles, you miss these hidden psychological costs entirely. You fail what we call the algebra of conscience, the actual math of human motivation. A misaligned incentive doesn't just fail to motivate, it sets off a devastating chain reaction across the entire organizational state vector.
Okay, let's look at how to fix this in Section 5, AI and Adaptive Architecture. To manage these complex state vectors without relying on just, biased human guesswork, we can turn to predictive modeling and something called AI vibe coding. This is a massive 2026 trend where users instruct large language models in natural language to generate applications without traditional code. It dynamically bridges deep behavioral data with real-time actionable UI. In practice, this looks like the SD Navigator you see here, an AI-built dashboard that tracks that exact algebra of conscience. It visualizes the current state vector, measuring those hidden psychological sensors, and maps the entire profile of the team. Before you enact a management control, the system models the transition function, literally predicting the butterfly effect on, say, your yellow integrators versus your orange achievers. By running your organization through this continuous SD Navigator loop, surveying the metrics, profiling the state vector, weighting those subjective values, modeling the butterfly effects before they happen, and only then acting, you completely swap out biased guesswork for scalable, mathematically rigorous empathy. You finally stop forcing functional specialization onto people who are hardwired for systemic integration.
So, I want to leave you with this massive question. What breaks when the marketing specialty is framed as a universal growth indicator rather than a contextual option? Think about your own teams. How do you design IT career development that actually preserves systemic integration? Ask yourself if your career pathways are nurturing growth or quietly breaking the very architects your company needs to survive. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this completely changes how you view the hidden architecture of your organization.